My name's Dave Cook, and myself and fellow Mechanical and Manufacturing Committee member Paul Dillon are the hosts for this evening. I'll be emceeing and Paul will be looking after questions. First of all, great to see such a large turnout with what promises to be a couple of very interesting presentations. We've got two presentations lined up. First up is Sarah Blake, Director of Earthology, who will talk on the benefits of putting sustainability at the heart of any business. And she'll be followed by Michael Kiely, who is Principal Engineer at Jabil Healthcare and will guide us through a look at sustainability within the single-use plastic products for medical devices. Just a note before we start the talks, we will have a questions and answers section at the end of each presentation. So please use the Q&A function, not the chat box within the Zoom to submit your questions, and Paul will be curating those and sharing them at the end of each talk. I hope you'll have a good discussion. So with that said, I'll introduce our first presenter. So Sarah Blake, thanks for joining us. Sarah began her career in recruitment before diversifying with a diploma in applied horticulture from the Royal Horticultural Society. These days, with the aid of some study at Cambridge University in sustainability leadership, she is now Director at Earthology, where she engages with businesses and individuals to help them on their own sustainability journeys. Sarah, thanks for joining us and volunteering to talk tonight. I'll hand over to you.
Perfect. Thanks very much, David. That's brilliant. So I have got a couple of slides, and I'm just well aware that it is a bit of a miserable month and a miserable Monday, although we didn't have too much rain today. So I am going to make this quite an interactive presentation. So we are going to use Menti and have a few word clouds and those kind of things. So we might even have a little quiz. I think we might just have time for it today. So I am going to hopefully start sharing my screen, and you can all shout at me if it's going wrong. And you should see the main Menti screen there. And I am now going to present. So hopefully that's going to work. She says. There we go. Ta-da. Right. Okay, so somebody howl at me if it isn't working. So, okay, so this evening we've got sort of 25 minutes, and I wanted to start with a brief kind of climate change overview, talk about the benefits, I suppose, and the reasons why sustainability should be at the heart of everything you do. Obviously, I'm very passionate about it, and I want to share that with you. So we're going to talk about the financial drivers. The other main things are brand, customers, employee engagement, and talent management. If you guys want to pop into Menti now, there's a QR code there, picture, or menti.com, and the code is 79881486. So if you want to pop in there, you'll see that it probably won't pop on to the next slide until I do. But hopefully as many people as possible can interact with that so that we can get a fully kind of interactive session as much as we can, given that we are not physically present, unfortunately, due to the situation that we're in. But fingers crossed we're going in the right direction with that. So I'm just going to flick on. So hopefully as many people as possible have managed to get into Menti, and it's probably something that you're all used to using. And you should be able to hopefully make it work. So a little question to kick us off, just to get you thinking about where you're at the moment. What I'd really like to know is, how does climate change affect your business or the business that you work for? So thanks very much for energy there. That's brilliant. But it can be as simple as, like, when there's storms, it's difficult to get to the office. Obviously, we don't really think that COVID is particularly climate change related, but obviously a lot of man-made interventions have caused where we're at in terms of the pandemic. There are other, I suppose, interventions that might cause us. I mean, is your business affected by regulation, by carbon tax, by the CEO driving things? Uncertainty for sure, and that's definitely something that we're coming up against. It might be stranded assets. So say, you have something like, a hydro-powered electric dam, and unfortunately, due to the fact that there's been no rain, that dam is now a stranded asset because it doesn't actually generate any electricity, those kind of things. Supply chains, obviously, even before Brexit and the pandemic, things were a bit wobbly, but now it seems to have stepped up a level in terms of supply chain, and that's a big thing that we talk about at Earthology as well. If you're still trying to get into Mentimeter, hopefully you can see at the top of there, it's menti.com, and the code is 79881486. Government policies, yeah, we're trying to see stuff coming down the line. But it's very, very slow. Ethics, that's a very strong one in terms of a lot of our clients come to us because of ethics, and you know their customers are starting to demand it. I don't know if anyone's seen it yet in tenders and things like that coming through, public procurement, those kind of things. Greta, that's brilliant. Thank you for that. The fabulous Greta and the climate strikes. Participated in a few of those, and so have my kids. Precious metals, that's interesting. Yeah, there's obviously a lot of pressure on things like that, and it's interesting now that even Apple is starting to take back phones, although they won't take anything, I think, that isn't younger than iPhone 6 or something at the moment. So they really need to get with the program and take everything, really, because soon they're going to have to mine their own devices for all the metals that we need for that, and then cobalt and things for batteries. Brilliant. Yeah, corporate values, that's another one. That's a really good. Guilt, I like that. Yeah, every time I do this I get some interesting, really interesting comments or whatever. Okay, so thanks for that. I think that's given everybody a really good kind of idea. So you've all done my job for me, and I no longer need to talk about the business case because you've given it there. No, just everything. Okay, so that's brilliant. Customer values. Oh, there's lots there that are really, really relevant. Okay, so moving on, and we'll keep that and make sure that's definitely in the slides. I just wanted to do a little quick video on climate change because we talk about it so much, and I assume all the time that people know exactly what we're talking about. But this quick little video gives you a really good synopsis of what we're talking about.
As the sun's rays reach the Earth's surface, some are absorbed and re-emitted as heat. Greenhouse gases, such as water vapor and carbon dioxide, absorb and re-radiate some of this heat. Increased amounts of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere mean more heat is trapped, warming the Earth. Human activities, especially the burning of fossil fuels, have increased concentrations of atmospheric carbon dioxide by 40%, mainly since 1900. Global average surface temperature has increased by 0.8 degrees Celsius over that time. Other changes to the climate in recent decades can be seen in the warming of the oceans, a rise in sea level, decreasing snow and ice cover in the Northern Hemisphere, and a decline in sea ice in the Arctic. If emissions continue unchecked, then further warming of 2.6 to 4.8 degrees Celsius would be expected by the end of this century. Even at the low end, this would have serious implications for human societies and the natural world.
Okay, so that's just a quick kind of overview, I guess, of climate change. But I just wanted to bring in a couple of things there. One is, I don't know if anyone's heard of Earth Overshoot Day. So overshoot days have been calculated by this organization in the US for all the countries across the world. And they have figured out that, unfortunately for Ireland, in 2021, we actually reached our Earth Overshoot Day on the 27th of April. So that means by April of last year, we'd already used all the resources that we would need in any one calendar year. So we'd effectively need like 2.5, 3 Earths worth of resources for the rest of the year. The UK wasn't much better on the 19th of May. So we really do need to think about this in terms of like, okay, we need to work back and use less resources. The reason I showed you the little video there about temperature is because the Paris Agreement said that we really need to keep to 1.5 degrees. And that is like, keep within 1.5 degrees by 2050. We're already at 1.1. So we're on a bit of a hiding to nothing, so we really need to get going. And what all this means is, I suppose, we've got all these extreme weather events, and that's what people really think climate change means to them, I suppose. You know, we're talking about snow, all the heat and drought that we've seen, all the heavy rains and the flooding. Those kind of things really make people think about climate change. Then the other thing is, David Attenborough and the David Attenborough effect, and you look at the reduction in biodiversity, which is absolutely huge. And obviously in Ireland, there's a big drive on our pollinators, because obviously we don't, the decline in bee population has been huge, but it's not just bees, we've got hoverflies and all the other things that help to pollinate our crops. But without those, we're not going to be able to produce our own crops, and apples particularly have been very affected by, us having snow, let's just say in April, instead of like now, we should be experiencing the cold that we're probably going to get again in around March, April time. Then ocean acidification. So the ocean is currently the biggest carbon sink that we have, and due to plastics, which I'm looking forward to hearing about the plastics later, things like plastics and the rise in temperature are causing the ocean to be less of a carbon sink than it was. And then things like food, supply chain for food. Obviously, with all the drought and the flooding and everything, our food and supply chains are under huge threat. Then we have obviously weather events and people suffering from that. And then we've got the health, pollution, in the sense that, not only are we breathing in apparently about a credit card of plastic a week, that also the pollution levels in terms of what we are breathing in is very high. And that's why, people come to climate change from so many different angles, depending on how it affects them. So how serious is climate change? Well, yeah, in my book, it's right up there. This was something done, I think, back in 2020 by John McKay. I think it's quite good. We have yet to see the recession that was meant to be coming after COVID, but, you never know what's going to happen. But the point being that, there's COVID, it's causing us all distress. We have to sit at home. There's all the things that come with that. But then you've got the recession, potentially climate change, and then the biodiversity collapse, which is going to come after that. And once that happens, we are going to be in a real pickle. So the definition of sustainability, most people, I think up until a couple of years ago, thought when you're talking about a sustainable business, you're talking about a business that is being able to continue for a long time. And I think probably that's still true. But really what we're talking about is the ability to continue over a long period of time and causing little or no damage to the environment. And therefore it can continue. So, if your business relies on precious metals, or if it relies on a hydroelectric dam or whatever, you're going to be already impacted by climate change substantially. So let's crack on. So the first one is the financial drivers. So sustainable and circular economy businesses outperform those that take, make, and waste. So I suppose, what do we mean by that? This was a survey done by global consultancy Kearney's, who surveyed 150 businesses in sort of sectors varying from consumer facing to B2B to retail. And 51 of these companies were classified as, let's say, circular economy leaders, meaning that their core business model was kind of non-linear. So it was going from, instead of this take, make, waste, it was going round in a circle. And that they have recently expanded maybe their offerings in that particular space. And when they compared these particular 51 companies to the wider group, they found that their revenues on average were 32% higher in comparative terms. So there really is a big, case, I suppose, for it out there. Then, of course, cutting costs. This could be, you install LEDs and, within, I suppose, weeks or months, they pay for themselves. And these same businesses also disclosed an average of 38% increase in cost savings. So that was very important. Profitability is really important, again, because I suppose, you are going to potentially make more profit if you put sustainability at the heart of what you do. Obviously, BlackRock, the investment company, have started to do that. And in fact, Deloitte released a pulsing survey, where they said that 80% of consumers would be willing to pay more if a brand raised its prices because of environmental promises. So it's important, I think, to look at those, because I think those, for any CEO or anybody driving a business, this is where they're going to listen. This is where they're going to set up, really sit up and take notice in terms of, a business case, a strong business case for driving that. So we're just going to have a little listen to Mark Carney talk about that in a little bit more detail.
The first thing is that climate change is one of the biggest structural shifts in the economy. It ranks up with everything else as part of the so-called fourth industrial revolution put together. So each business is going to need a strategy on how it's going to respond, how it's going to contribute to this transition to net zero carbon economy, and how it's going to take advantages of the opportunities created. So the first thing to do as business leaders is to have that as part of the responsibility of the CEO, have board level responsibility for overseeing the transition. You can judge yourselves how you want to design your compensation, but certainly within the financial sector, we increasingly expect that some of the risk-based compensation of the senior-most managers will be tied to performance in terms of the response to climate change. So the first thing is making it a priority and the appropriate seniority of the organization focused on it. And then the second is to recognize and anticipate what will be required from the overall business operating environment if Scotland in the UK and the world are truly going to move towards a net zero economy. Anticipate, game out and anticipate where the price on carbon may need to go. Anticipate which activities will be favored and which will be penalized as the economy, by regulation, by government action, as the economy shifts from where we are today to where we need to get to tomorrow. And then adjust business accordingly. And then, of course, as business people, you get up every day and you think about how you can serve your clients, your stakeholders, whether they're suppliers, your employees, your communities, and think about the impact, what they want, what the impact is on them, and anticipate where they're going. It is likely that in a series of industries, there are going to be a fairly quick and potentially sizable shifts in consumer attitudes around these issues. We've already seen some around diesel cars, for example, around plastics, around different types of food choices, and more of those could be coming. Again, stopping and thinking about things from the lens of there's a major transition that is started, that societies demand, that is demanded, that is the law of the land, and we're all going to play a part in this. And then, of course, you as businesses, individually and collectively, are probably, well, you will best anticipate how to respond to those, how to meet stakeholder demands, how to meet your customer demands to move forward. The financial markets will be there to help with that transition.
Okay, we don't need to hear about the financial markets, but yeah, so if you don't take my word for it, definitely take Mark Carney's word for it. Yeah, we need to do more. So now you're all here, so I am going to get going with a little quiz question because I see we are a little bit pushed for time already. So just to see if you're all awake while you're listening, what percent cost saving did circular economy businesses report? So was it 32%, 38% or 43%? Can you remember what I said about the business savings? Let's see if anybody can remember, just to keep you on your toes. Okay, it was actually 38%. Yeah, so I did say that 31%, I think it was 32% had comparative revenues in higher terms, but their cost savings were actually 38%. So well done. So let's see who was that. We're going to do a little leaderboard quickly to see who is in the lead there. So, okay. Venture. I love the little icons this gives everybody. So okay, let's see. So cracking on. I want to talk about brand and customer drivers. So this is huge right now in where we're at with COVID and everything. It really is, people want a brand that has a purpose. They want something that, especially the younger generation, the Gen Z and the screenagers, as they're called, they're hooked on impact. They want a product and to work somewhere that really makes a difference. You can see there from my figure on the Deloitte survey that, it's really important that, how the company treats the environment. I mean, this is 2019. So, this has definitely gone up since then in some of the other surveys that they've done. Then obviously, it's very much about consumers choosing a sustainable product at the checkout. So, most people, I suppose, if given the option and the affordability is there, will pick that more sustainable option. I think Unilever revealed, I think, a 4th consecutive year of growth for its sustainable living brands. So this is a lot of brands that it actually bought, if you like, so like the likes of Ben & Jerry's and those kind of things, which grew something like 46% faster than the rest of their business and delivered something like 70% of its turnover growth. So it really is, it's a big step forward. And then just in terms of people and societal impact, the Edelman Trust Barometer reckons that 80% of people want society, want brands to solve society's problems. And then finally, trust. Again, this is an Edelman survey thing. 53% of respondents to their survey said whether you trust the company that owns the brand or the brand that makes the product is the second most important factor when purchasing a product. So people really do think it's important. So this is from last year. Oh, no, it's not going to play today. Poor Mr. Edelman. Okay, that's good because we actually haven't got time to listen to him. So let's see if you can remember what I was just talking about. Let's see if it's going to work. Okay, so what percent of people want brands to solve society's problems? Was it 75, 79 or 80%? So let's see if you remembered what I just said. We don't have to listen to Mr. Edelman, but I'll tell you what he said. Let's see. Okay, so you're all on the button. Yeah, absolutely. It was 80% of 80% of people want brands to solve society's problem, and that has gone even further actually in the Edelman Trust Barometer last year. Oh, Eamon's coming up. Sakura, was that Zlatan? Maverick Bill. Oh yeah, I love Puggy down the end there. So we have some clear winners. So the last kind of point is employee engagement and talent. So I suppose it's something that we know fairly obviously that right now that millennials, Gen Z, whatever we're going to call them, according to a recent survey by Deloitte, climate change is in fact a very top concern for them. They want to work somewhere with purpose, and it's a core differentiator for them. So when you're thinking about, if you're in that kind of role where you're looking at, people in the workforce and the people that work with you, something like 70% of millennials expect their employers to focus on societal mission-driven problems, and then trust really does drive that. So again, that comes back to the Edelman survey. Then I suppose community, people really want to work for a company that supports the community. And again, this does come back to sustainability. Sustainability is not just about the environment, it's also about the society, how you look after your people, that kind of stuff. And then improve productivity. Again, I think, companies where you see that they are purpose orientated, they definitely have higher productivity and growth rates. So we'll have a quick look at the millennial survey from Deloitte, and then we are nearly good to finish, I think.
Millennials and Gen Zs have known their share of challenges. From the global recession that curbed the beginning of their careers, to the constant change and always-on mentality of Industry 4.0, to new political and social movements, this pace has taken a toll on them. Prior to the pandemic, nearly half reported feeling stressed all or most of the time about the economy, their finances, their family's welfare, and the environment. But they've never accepted the status quo. They've taken a stand and have tried to make a difference. Then, in 2020, came another blow: COVID-19. The ensuing pandemic heightened their concerns about their family's health and welfare, job security, and long-term finances. But while the world outside slowed, something inside them accelerated. These generations are resilient. They now feel an even stronger sense of responsibility to drive the change they want to see in the world.
Okay, so I'm going to stop it there because it does go on a little bit. But yeah, so basically these guys, they're really
more
want,
optimistic.
sorry about that. They really want to work for somewhere that has purpose. So last question for our quiz, and then we'll have a winner, and we will go to questions. So what percent of millennials expect their employees to focus on societal problems? So were we listening? Was it 70, 75 or 80%? What percent of millennials expect their employees to focus on societal problems? It's a good bit more than you think. And it's probably gone up actually since then. Very good. Okay. Yeah, it was actually 70%. So very well done. That was a sneaky question on my part because just checking you're all still awake. So let's see. It looks like Eamon was the winner. Maverick coming a close second. Eamon, you are the winner. Maverick and Zlatan, you are next. So congratulations, Eamon. You were obviously listening. So just quickly to wrap up, describe the business case for sustainability in 3 words. So given what I've just told you there, just throw anything at Menti, whatever you like, as long as it's relevant. So is it employees? Is it tax, carbon tax? Is it like what's return on investment? Exactly. That's the main one when I'm talking to a CEO. That's exactly what we're talking about. Or is it, for you, it depends on where you're at in different businesses, and different people have different ideas. Like for some people, it's really important that their employees stay and they can have good staff retention. You know what I mean? That's really important, I think, to a lot of people, and especially when staff turnover, apparently we're going to be having this massive great resignation, so as people brilliant, marketability, sustainability, competitive. Yeah, okay, excellent. Okay, so you're all listening. Fabulous. So this will be I'll send these through as well, because these are really good things if you want to put this as a business case to somebody. These are really good things to put in. So okay, thank you very much. That is pretty much me. So I don't know if we're going to do questions now or
yeah, Sarah, I have one question kind of came through, is if a company wanted to move into the circular economy, could you suggest some good sources of information? This is from a person in a kind of a manufacturing background.
Okay, so I think it depends where the company's at. If they're a new company, are they existing? Because if you are, early stages, it's obviously much easier to integrate these type of circular economy practices into your business. If you are somebody who's been in business for a good while, let's say it's a furniture manufacturer or something like that, you're going to have to look at your whole business design. Start with recyclability to see if you can close the loop there. Can you make it modular? Those are the kind of things. If you look at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, they have an absolute amazing website. There's a company, there's a modular headphone company, for example, where you effectively rent the headphones, and then if something breaks, you send off, they send you the part, you can fix it yourself, which is obviously the way Apple are meant to be moving, but I don't see that happening anytime soon. So yeah, Ellen MacArthur, I would say, or yeah, come and have a chat to us and I can point you in the right direction.
Okay, thanks. That was really the only one that came through.
Jolly good. Well, hopefully we're all awake after a Menti quiz now. No slackers out there.
That's great. Thank you, Sarah. So definitely reassuring to see that businesses are feeling the pressure, not just from the the promotional side, but actually both employees and customers putting the pressure on them there. So great talk, thank you. I'll move on now in the interest of time to Michael, our second speaker. But if you do have any additional questions for Sarah, do add them in the Q&A and we can loop back to them at the end. So moving on to second presenter, I'd like to introduce Michael Kiely. He's a colleague of mine. Michael first joined Jabil Healthcare as an intern in 2012 with a degree in physics from DCU. In the 9 years since then, he's built up an incredible knowledge and experience of injection molding of medical devices to the point that he is now a principal device development engineer within the design department at the site in Bray. And he's going to give us some examples, hopefully addressing some of the issues raised by Sarah within the specific area of medical plastics. Michael, over to you.
Thanks very much, David. Okay, I'll share my presentation here. So okay, so I think thanks for Sarah's is a very interesting, I think, on the business case for sustainability. And I think now we move on to specifically how we can integrate sustainability into device design and with practical solutions. So what I'm going to start off here, just give a biography in jet. So David gave a very good introduction there, so I'll keep that brief. Look at market trends for sustainability and then into design for sustainability. So an introduction to what it is, into an overview of our DFX process. So our DFX is really our early stage optimization. So it's designed for X, where X can be assembly, manufacturing, electronics, etc. Talk about concept selection, how you bring forward the most sustainable concepts. Talk about DFA, which is designed for assembly. DFE, designed for electronics. Talk about material selection, which is key for sustainable design. And then look at some of the areas as well around like medical grade resin production, how you can have more sustainably produced resins, and then recycling as well. Some of the challenges around recycling resins and the different recycling methods you can use. And then I'll just give you an example as well of the process in action of what we've done here at the design team in Bray for developing a sustainable device that can be brought back materials into the circular economy. So an overview, so David gave a very good overview here. So I'm working here in Jabil since 2013 and work in the design and development team where we design and develop contract, develop design development for our customers across a huge array of different medical device companies. And we work at all stages from initial concept selection through to production support. So we're based in Bray here in Ireland, and then we have other design sites in the US and in Asia as well. Covering a vast array of medical devices, so going from medical devices for dialysis equipment, infusion pumps, to consumer health, so wearables, connected health, heart rate monitors, pharmaceutical delivery systems like inhalers, smart auto injectors, and then diagnostics, which is a really fast growing area, obviously with a lot of the PCR testers that everyone will be familiar with. CT scanners, MRI imaging, all sorts of chemistry analyzers or point of care devices as well. So that's kind of the devices that we design and develop here. So I suppose at the start of the year, so we understand sustainability is becoming a big concern for our customers, and it's something that we've been driving for a number of years here at Jabil as well. And so I suppose it's largely driven by consumers. So there's a Deloitte survey carried out in March 2021 that shows, nearly 1 in 3 consumers claim to have stopped purchasing certain brands because they have ethical or sustainability concerns. So it's driving people's decisions on what products they use. And 61% of UK consumers surveyed said reducing single-use plastics in the past 12 months is a key way of they adopt a more sustainable lifestyle. So there is a key driver behind against single-use plastic devices from consumers. And then in the medical device industry itself, so about 90% of medical device waste comes from single-use components or products. So there's a huge opportunity there if we can bring those into the circular economy and reduce the amount of single-use plastics in medical design. And obviously that's applicable across other areas as well. And then the other one is the key driver. So all companies, if you go to any medical device company, or I say most companies worldwide, they'll have a sustainability section, and signed up to a lot of sustainability development goals. And really, it's how do they meet those? And to meet those, you need more sustainable devices. And to get more sustainable devices, you obviously need to design them more sustainably. Is the easiest way to do that. So then, sustainability, I suppose, as well, it's a huge value proposition. So in 2018, I suppose there was a market valued at 1.8 billion for reprocessed medical devices, and then that's grown at a rate of 15%. And then there's huge kind of business opportunities in the circular economy as well. So you can extract value from the waste material. So at Jabil, for instance, we have these data to dust centers which recycle old data centers and servers and extract the value from that, from the various materials in them. So they have high value materials in the electronic componentry, and reuse in other elements of it, such as the racks and reusable elements of the PCBs. So reusing, recycling, and then extracting the value from that as well. So it actually makes a profit versus going to landfill, which would have a cost. And then the value proposition to reduce waste costs. So you can see here on the right, cost when you go from recycling can be €0 to €170, and then actually incinerating healthcare risk can be €2,000 per ton. So there's a huge incentive there to reduce the amount of waste that goes to landfill, and goes to, especially for healthcare waste, that goes to landfill from a cost perspective, as well as obviously the environmental impact. And then reduce waste costs during production. So having zero waste to landfill and increasing recycling will reduce your production costs, your waste costs specifically. And then there's an ever-evolving regulatory environment there, especially within Europe and the EU. And there's grants and tax relief for sustainabilities. And I expect as time goes on that there will be penalties for companies who are not sustainable and who are not meeting the sustainability goals that governments have signed up to. And then, so how do we do this? So I suppose we know there's a huge drive for sustainability and there's a value there, but so why are we doing this? So there's growing customer demand, new business opportunities in the circular economy. So there's a value in doing that. And then supports sustainability goals such as zero waste at landfill, increasing waste recovery and recycling, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and then it supports an evolving regulatory landscape. So there's more and more regulation around sustainability that companies have to adhere to. And then how do we do this? So doing it, the best way to do it is design sustainability in at the start. So utilizing the flexibility you have at the early design stage to optimize designs for the circular economy. And then also utilizing a tool that support predictive outcomes for a circular economy and calculate the carbon footprint, so that you can have a relative value of the carbon impact of different designs and choose the most sustainable design to progress. So really, I suppose what we're saying here, so the optimal place to impact sustainability is at the early concept stage. So here you have a high ability to impact sustainability, but as you move towards, prototype development stage and towards production, your ability to impact sustainability decreases. And then conversely, there's a low cost at the early concept stage to introduce sustainability, where really it's at a theoretical design stage. So if you want to change material, if you want to change design, if you want to reduce components, if you want to make the device more easy to disassemble, to extract components, it's a matter of hours, or changing a bill of materials, or changing the CAD design. But as you move towards prototype and production, those same changes can take months, and they'll cost hundreds of thousands or millions, especially in the medical device industry, where there's a huge challenge to change. There's a controlled change process that takes a long time and requires a lot of effort. So as you move towards production, your ability to impact sustainability is less, and the cost and time to do it gets much higher. And so what we have here is an early design stage process. So it goes from initial concept selection through to design optimization, where we optimize design for high volume manufacture, optimize it for assembly, for manufacturing, for electronics, for testing. We finalize that design. So we do theoretical analysis, which would be finite element analysis, tolerance analysis, material selection, and then we design ready for prototype. So this is the area where we really want to maximize sustainability. And currently the focus really most of is on optimizing the design, optimizing the manufacturability of the design, and optimizing the assembly. And what we really aim to do is to introduce sustainability criteria as a key factor here, so that you're considering sustainability upfront and you're bringing a sustainable design through to the physical production of that device. So it all really starts with the concept selection. So concept selection, you've maximum flexibility, and what most companies will use here is where you have a number of different concepts that you're assessing that you want to bring forward. One concept through to the development stage, you'll use a weighted concept selection stage. So you'll have a number of requirements. It could be functional, regulatory, commercial, increasingly, and now sustainability. And then you will weigh those requirements and assess your device against those. So typically the focus would have been on, design, the functionality of the device, how easy the device is to assemble and how easy it is to manufacture. And what really is important is consider sustainability here. So to consider items such as is the device disassemblable? Could you use a modular design so that you can separate out the reusable element of the device and have a smaller disposable element that's also recyclable? And what kind of manufacturing methods could you use? Could you use additive manufacturing to combine some components and reduce the amount of material or waste? So there's many ways you can make the device more sustainable, but you really need to consider them here at the early concept stage. And so once you have those requirements, you can weigh those based upon their importance, and then assess each of the concepts against that those weighted requirements. And then out of this, you can choose a concept that not only, I suppose, meets your kind of your manufacturability and your functional requirements, but it's also the most optimal sustainable design that you're bringing forward in the concept stage through to your kind of detailed design stage. So then once you're at your concept selection stage, you're going into kind of detailed optimization. So where you're optimizing your design for assembly, for manufacture, electronics, testing. So these are the current areas assessed. So in this stage, you would typically work with different SMEs within each of those areas to optimize your design for the end if it's a high volume assembly method, whatever your manufacturing methods are going to be. But what's critical here is that you integrate sustainability into each of these areas. So next, I'll go through an example just specifically on design for assembly and how you would introduce sustainable thinking into your assembly process. So in design for assembly, the traditional approach here would be to look at your assembly process flow. So where you have a device that you're assembling and you have a number of assembly steps, you would consider at each of those assembly steps how we would optimize that for large volume assembly. So you might look at how you'd have oriented features. You might look at assembly lead-ins. You might look how it's being bulk fed. You might look at how might be inspection methods, or other areas that would be assessments for a high volume, fully automated line. But what's important from a sustainability perspective is that you also look at the disassembly of the device. So here is where we've introduced a disassembly process flow. And then you can assess each of those disassembly steps, and you can consider things such as reducing contaminants. So really from a sustainability perspective, you want to have as little contaminants to your material as possible. So you might reduce kind of use of paints or lubricants or additional materials that could contaminate the waste stream, avoiding things like screws and bolts, which would be onerous to disassemble and might be not cost effective. So avoiding welding processes as well, where you're welding two materials together, so then you cannot separate them at a later point to enter into their individual recycling streams. Avoiding high energy assembly processes, so you might avoid things such as ultrasonic welding or things like that for joining components that would have a high energy impact. You can look at novel kind of methods here as well. So one way of doing it could be utilizing shape memory resins. So these are memory resins that when you apply a high temperature, they will conform to a certain shape. And then this would allow you to heat the materials post-use and then disassemble them with ease. So to be able to extract those materials and enter them into their recycling streams, and then avoiding things like labels, painting, etc. So really these are, I suppose, materials that are difficult to separate, and then yeah, it makes it challenging to get the materials into separate states that you can recycle individually. So that's one method for the assembly, to look at it in a more sustainable way. And then another key area then is for electronics. So there's more and more electronics and in devices now, and especially in connected devices and connecting devices to the cloud, so that medical information can be relayed back to the healthcare practitioners, and allows for more catered regimens and monitoring of patients. So you're seeing more and more electronics in medical devices. And there's a number of ways that you can design your electronics in order to make them more sustainable. So looking at the typical kind of reduce, reuse, recycle methodology. So reduce, so it having fewer different parts in the circuit boards, standardizing components and materials as well. It makes it easier to recycle and separate the parts. Reduce, eliminating excessive packaging is always key. Reusing as well, so having harvestable componentry, and then within these having less solder and more socket connections so they can be harvested easily and reused. And then for those components, also having simple functional tests to meet R2 or equivalent requirements for resale, so that once these parts are reused, they can be tested to prove the functionality. And then recycling as well, so having easy access to componentry so that they can be recycled, having easy to separate components like removable heat sinks, for example, avoiding painting or coating processes, again, there's being contaminants, disassembly using standard tools so that it can be disassembled in a wide array of areas, optimizing disassembly steps, so e.g. enable multiple detachments of components in one operation, so that would make the disassembly process more easy. And then choosing compatible polymers as well that can be broken down together. So where we have mixed polymers that might be separated via tank settlement process, if we know certain polymers can be compatible for that separation technique as well. So there is a table that will give you polymers that are suitable for those kind of separation techniques during recycling. And then I suppose finally, one of the key areas then for designing for sustainability is material selection. So what we have typically is a material selection process where we'll have a requirement for the component. So these component requirements would come from multiple areas, from like regulatory requirements, from device functionality requirements, from supply chain. There would be biocompatibility requirements and sterilization requirements for medical devices typically. So we take all these requirements, and from this we'd have a number of material options. So if this was a plastic device, there might be 3 different types of polycarbonate potentially. So taking these material options, what we've developed, we have a partner that we work with that has a sustainability database, so we can upload these material data sheets to the sustainability database. Then these are disseminated to various different recycling partners. And then these recycling partners will confirm if that particular resin can be used in one of their recyclable grades. So once we've confirmed that we have a vendor that will take that material and will process that post-use and recycle it, we can choose that material, and then separately we look at have a sustainability assessment. So I'll talk about that in the next slide, but where we can look at the resin production, look at the supplier of the material as well and their sustainability credentials, like things are they using renewable energy in their plants, what water usage, other sustainability initiatives that the company might have that might make them a suitable partner. And then taking those 2 assessments so that the material is recycled, that is sustainably produced, then we can choose the material that we will take forward as the device, and that we know has a path for the circular economy and has a low carbon impact during production. So that's kind of the material selection process overview. And then I suppose going a little bit more in depth into that. So these are kind of medical grade resins. So there's lots of material selection options out there now. So the typical method that is used is a mass balance model. So for material resin, there's feedstocks, and typically these feedstocks are from fossil fuel based, which has a high carbon footprint. our carbon footprint impact. And then, so alternatively, you can have biodegradable feedstocks. So the biodegradable feedstocks can have a zero carbon impact during production. So typically what we'll have is a mass balance model where there's a percentage of fossil fuel feedstocks and percentage of biodegradable feedstocks. And then this is managed through a bookkeeping system. So then once you have the end resin that's made from these feedstocks, you have a certified reading of what percentage is biodegradable feedstocks and what percentage is carbon fossil fuel feedstocks, and then that gives you an overall result for the carbon impact of the production of that resin. So you can see from this up here, so there's POM grades where the actual kilogram CO2 per kilogram polymer of resin produced is reduced by about a third from your typical POM by using this mass balance approach and by using these biodegradable feedstocks in the resin production. And so, like, these materials can be swapped in for the similar fossil fuel feedstock made polymer, and then they're certified by a third party body to recognize their carbon impact during production. So it's an easy method. So it's directly swapped in for the plastic that is, and it has a low carbon footprint impact. So it's kind of a win-win situation there. And so there's lots of companies that are doing that. So Celanese, Borealis are two big resin manufacturers, and they have kind of more kind of eco-grade polymer options for most of their grades. So that's a really good option for when you're choosing materials for your device. And then looking at sort of recycling methods. So if you look at this graph on the bottom here, so as you go from your typical feedstock, so if you start off with your waste, so there's a number of options. You can go either to landfill or incineration. And then what you ideally want to do is recycling. So as you go from the green at the bottom here, which is mechanical recycling and dissolution, so these are low energy kind of recycling processes. They're efficient, they're cheap, they're best time to market, and the best CO2 gas foot kind of carbon footprint impact. But the risk here from medical device perspective is typically there's a requirement to have virgin material resins, and you can have potentially some issues with mechanical recycling where the material properties might be impacted by any contaminants in the waste stream or any defects there. So as you go further up, you have more high energy processes like depolymerization. So this brings you back to the base monomer. And these are kind of under review for food contact applications. So they're closer back to the base feedstock, but they still have some potential contamination there. So they're not suitable for medical grade yet. And then as you go back to kind of pyrolysis and gasification kind of methods, these are very high energy intense methods for recycling plastics, but they bring you back to the base feedstock. So then this should be kind of medical grade equivalent, and they should have a high purity that would maintain the properties of the resin that you're looking for. So those are a number of different recycling options. The easiest one is typical mechanical recycling, but it has the least purity. But then the more high energy processes, you get back to the basic feedstock. But you really need an economy of scale to be able to do that at a cost-effective way. So there's a number of companies looking into the kind of more advanced recycling methods, but there's not really many options available on the market yet, but should be some coming down the line. So that's recycling of plastics. And I suppose just to close this up, I suppose it's just talking about this process in action. So here at Braze, so we have device scrap that comes from inhalers that we make on site. So we worked with we have a third-party vendor that does the assessment of the materials, and they disseminate this information to their suppliers. So we actually, I suppose another point is that we do process all this material on site. So we have grinders on site, so it helps in the CO2 impact of the transportation of it. So by breaking it down on site, we're not transporting devices off that contain a lot of air. So we have a more efficient way of transporting it to the recycling vendors by processing it first on site, and lower carbon impact. So we can take that material and we supply it to our vendor, who has a sustainability database that disseminates that to a number of recycling vendors worldwide, or mainly in Europe. So Netherlands is the hub for recycling in Europe. So a lot of this processing of resins is done over there. So we found a vendor in the Netherlands that would take that particular grade of plastic, and then it's actually made into different things like shopping baskets, football seats, and that. So I suppose it just shows that it is a process in action, that we have inhalers that we're making here that are actually the waste of those materials is actually being remade, rebrought into circular economy, and then it is reused in other applications that we can find worldwide. So it's a bit of success story to leave it, just to say that it's not just all theory, it's sustainability, that it actually designing more sustainable devices up front does lead to the circular economy, and that the device you're using today could end up being the seat you're sitting on in a football stadium a few years down the line. So I'll leave it at that. So that's me. So I'll just leave it open to questions then.
Okay, this is Paul Dillon. I'll kind of moderate the questions. So there's a kind of couple of questions kind of came in. One was for Sarah. She might, I'll give her a couple of minutes to think about it. The circular economy has many advantages, but it also has important problems. Please comment on these problems so we get a balanced perspective. Michael might have some ideas of that. And then kind of one for Michael that he might be able to answer fairly quickly. What would be an appropriate sustainability strategy for single-use disposable plastics that have come in contact with biologically hazardous materials? Would you have an answer?
Yeah, that is one of the big challenges out there, because typically I think, as I went through in the first slide, that when you have that biological waste, the standard process is that goes to incineration, so it's deemed as a biohazard, and the costs for that are huge, and it's obviously not very environmentally friendly either. So I suppose it's something we're investigating in at the moment. I don't think there's a solution out there that I know of yet, but I think one potential solution would be post-sterilization of those that bio waste, to bring it back to I suppose a sterile unit, and then recycling that waste. So that's I think one of the early graphs I showed was that. So by sterilizing the waste first, and then actually bring it into recycling then after, post sterilization, is one potential solution. I haven't seen any practical applications of that yet, but there could be cost barriers involved there to do that, but that would be the ideal path.
So you're really saying is that the potential is that you'd have to sterilize the actual materials afterwards, after use, in order to get them back into a recycling chain.
You would,
okay.
yeah.
Okay, next question for this might be more for Michael as well. I'll come back to you now in a second, Sarah. Are there challenges and or conflicts between the current USP or FDA regulations regarding materials that can be recycled?
I guess I'm not aware of those regulations. So I haven't come across any boundaries, I suppose. And speaking from a design perspective, I guess that should be an important consideration going in. So I guess what we would look at is we would look at choosing materials that are understanding that up front before selecting material that it is actually recyclable post use, and that you have, even I suppose some materials are potentially recyclable, but there might not actually be a specific vendor that will take them. So it's really what we've developed is that we have there are companies that will do it as well, that have a lot of they have a lot of contacts within the recycling industry, so you can give them your material grade, and they can so go and find out, okay, if that actually has a specific recycling vendor that will take that and recycle it. So I think it's important, not just that I guess you're choosing the grade that's recyclable, but that actually that specific grade is actually has a recyclable composite that it will be used in. So I think, yeah, I'm not aware of that FDA regulations, but I think it is very important just to understand not just that it's a recyclable type of material, but that the specific plastic that you're going to use is recyclable.
Okay. So Sarah, coming back to you, the problems with this circular economy, is there any things that you can think of there for a so-called balanced perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose there are what in sustainability we call unintended consequences. So, and Michael sort of touched on it a bit there in terms of, you know, just because something's recyclable doesn't mean to say that it is actually recycled, because there might not be a market for it. So like, I think it's LDPE, or, you know, like the plastics that we're now supposedly putting into our bins here, most of it's still burnt, like, because there isn't a market for it. So, and that's, you know, that's a little bit the problem. And sometimes the process of trying to make these things recyclable is much more carbon intensive than probably just burning it or disposing it in that way. So yeah, I agree with where that person's coming from, that, you know, in trying to make something circular economy, you might end up with maybe a worse emissions problem over here. So it's always, and I can see that from Michael's presentation, it's all about weighing up, like, what's going to go with this, is this polymer going to be better than this one? Ultimately, you know, things that are made out of one polymer are much better because it's so much easier for the whole thing just to be dunked and to be recycled. Because once you start getting into things like, you know, foil backed crisp packets, and, you know, TerraCycle say they're recycled, but I really don't know what happens to them because it's a soup, they have to melt it down, you know, it's very complicated. So yeah, there are issues with that. And then in terms of the circular economy, you do have to find that market, because otherwise it's not fully circular. I mean, where do those football seats go, or whatever, you know what I mean, stadium seats, you know, where do they go after that? So if they break, where do they go next? Can they be melted down and come back again? We actually did a garden in Bloom, I think it's now nearly 3 years ago, and we had different things on our garden that were made from recycled plastic. You know, but I mean, it was basic stuff. Some of it was PVC. You know, it all come down, but they were made into planters or benches and those kind of things. But where are they going to go after that? So it's about thinking about the ultimate end of life of something, and can it come back into the whole process, and making it, like Michael said, you know, in terms of modular, making it easier to be recycled right from the get-go. And that's why the question that you asked right at the outset, definitely if you're an early stage company, it's so much easier to look at what you're doing. One final point is that there is I suppose an organization called Responsible Plastic Management. I don't know if anybody's come across them. They're kind of Belfast, Cork based, and they are working with quite a lot of food companies actually, but going through their plastic supply chain and how they can ease out the plastic. Where can they put back in cardboard? Is that going to be a better option? Those kind of things, and certainly educating employees. So if anybody's interested in that, they can give me a shout, but hopefully that rather long-windedly answers your question.
Okay, thanks for that. One other question there from Robert. There are a huge number of FDA, EMA approved medical devices already in the marketplace. Could you comment on changing existing products to become more sustainable, bearing in mind the large administration costs of complying with regulations?
Yeah, no, I think it becomes very challenging once something's already on the market to change it, especially in the medical device world, that like where safety, well, patient safety and functionality is key. I think what we've done certainly on our side was we've looked for sustainable solutions for devices that we already make. So by reaching out to the various vendors to increase the amount of, like, so we're zero waste to landfill site. So we've come up with lots of novel solutions for bringing the waste back into circular economy or finding alternate kind of reuse situations for it. So I think once the device is there, I think anyone will be aware that to bring in a change after something in production is on the market is very challenging. So your room to maneuver is very small. So I think at that point, I think it's engaging with vendors to optimize the sustainability of that device. And I think even when device is on the market, it's understanding the returns kind of procedure for that device as well. So if you don't have control over the actual disposal of the device or how it's disposed, then gathering that waste so that it's you can actually recycle it or bring it back into a process that brings it into circular economy is challenging. Sorry, the light has gone out here. It's quite.
That's okay. I can see it's
saving.
Energy. Yeah, very good.
Yeah. So.
Okay. Yeah, there was just somebody commented about one of the earlier questions about that the European Commission is strongly supportive of industry realizing the circular ambition or the circular economy. And kind of maybe related to that, Michael, did you put this kind of process together yourself, or was it part of a company policy that was already there? Or I think sourcing information is really important for people, maybe they're only starting out on this kind of process.
Yeah. So largely, so I think we as a company, so we sustainability and how we produced was always very high as as a site, like all our the energy that we use and saving energy on site and recycling waste from on site was big. I think from a design perspective, it hadn't been considered, and I think it is something that is lacking. Is actually, I was surprised when I got into design sustainability that it was something that was a glaring omission. So it was a bit of an eye opener. But I think once it's really reaching out to, I think looking at the end use. So if you know where a device goes after it's used, what are the challenges in recycling a component, and then bring that back into design. So you really have to engage with people who are working very closely in that recycling community. So we have, I think it's engaging with those companies. So there are a lot of companies out there that are finding sustainable solutions for companies like us. And I think as a designer, you need to engage with those because they're the people who have they understand the recycling process, they understand the companies, the challenges. So you need to understand those challenges in order to design better for them and pick better materials and design a device that is actually practically recyclable. So I think that was the big eye opener for me. And I think it just, like anything, I think at the design, you need to figure out what happens at end of life and engage with people who manage that and then bring that back into design. So that would be my my main advice from the last year or two journey that I've been on.
Okay. That's the questions covered. So I'll hand you.
That's great.
I'll hand you back to David. Yep.
Thanks, Paul. So yeah, it just falls to me to close out this evening. So firstly, I'd say again a big thank you to both our speakers tonight for taking the time both to join us this evening and also ahead of this evening to actually prepare these talks. So thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Michael. And also a big thank you to all of you for taking the time to join us this evening. Do keep an eye on the Engineers Island and IMechE websites and on your emails for other upcoming events. Thank you all and have a good evening.